We're going to go ahead and call the meeting of the City of Kerrville, Texas Economic Improvement Corporation to order. It is 4 o'clock. If I could get Jim Wilson to ask the invocation.
Shall we bear in prayer? Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the many blessings of this day. And Father, we thank you for our great city and what it means to us individually and collectively. Father, we pray that the business that we undertake on the behalf of this city will be prudent and to the edification and glorification, not only the city, but your humble kindness and that one that you will approve of. Father, take us through this day and make all of the right moves that we should do. Let us go united as we complete your work here in this city. We ask all of these things in Christ's name and for his sake. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Jim. All right, item number 1 is the Visitors and Citizens Forum. Any citizen with business not scheduled on the agenda may speak to the Economic Improvement Corporation. No deliberation or action can be taken on these items because the Open Meetings Act requires an item be posted on the agenda 72 hours before the meeting. Visitors are asked to limit their presentation to 3 minutes. Any visitors today want to speak? All right, I see none. Let's move on to item number 2, which is approval of the minutes from the regular meeting held on September 18th, 2017. Those minutes were provided to all of us in the email package. I think we got those Friday.
Mm-hmm. Thanks to Ms. Brown and her band of renown.
Yeah, I got one question on the minutes.
Okay.
I think it's actually a correction. The discussion of 4C, I think it says I think Granger McDonald is who it says, but I believe it was Justin McDonald who stated if the possibility of action is not on the table today, then we would rather not waste everyone's time.
I listened to the recording and I think they may have both said something similar,
okay.
But those words were spoken by Granger McDonald.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments on the minutes? Do I have a motion to approve them?
I approve the minutes as read.
We have a motion and a second.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes, raise your right hand. And those pass unanimously. On to item number 3A, which is our monthly financials for September of 2017. Sandra?
Good afternoon. On page 11 of your agenda, we have at the top of the page is your operating fund. Your beginning cash was $2,856,140. You had income during the month of $268,362, with expenditures of $851,561, leaving you an ending cash balance of $2,272,941. At the bottom of the page is your capital funds accounts. Your beginning cash was $1,869,155, with income of transfers in for projects of $750,000, expenditures of transfers out to the capital projects fund of $519,154, leaving you an ending cash balance of $2,100,000. On page 12 shows your annual budget for 2017. The current period expenses, your year-to-date, and your remaining balances of your budget. And this is as of September 30. On page 13, I combined several pages that you had been getting before. At the top of the page is your sales tax revenue analysis for the year, and at the end of the year, 2017 compared to 2016 was at 5.49% over the prior year. In the middle of the page is the committed funded project status summary, which ties to your capital projects fund. And down in the bottom part is your cash and investments and where it is placed. And at the very bottom shows the projects that EIC has funded in some part over time that are still currently active projects. On page 14 will be your new budget for 2018.
I like page 13.
Well, it cuts out a lot of paper in between.
Any questions on any of the reports for Sandra? All right, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Sandra.
Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you.
Agenda item 3B is the projects update on the River Trail, the sports complex, the reuse distribution lines, and the tennis center. EA?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm going to go a little bit out of order here, just how they are on my sheet. Reuse distribution mains, we're making lots of good progress there. We've got, really have completed the extension down Holdsworth, completed most of the extension down Legion Drive, doing a little, mostly cleanup work on both of those, just getting things looking in good shape again. And then have all of the borings complete through 173 East Main and over to Schreiner University. So making a lot of good progress on that. We have the river structure is complete as far as the structure that will be holding the piping. That piping has not been extended across there yet, but that's going to be happening very soon. River Trail West, we have completed the easement work and the license agreement work with the Diedert Center, and so those bids are on the construction plans are on the street right now, and we'll be receiving bids over the next month or so. Anticipate that being on the council's agenda for the November 14th meeting. Kerrville Sports Complex, essentially substantially complete at this point, just down to punch list items. Grass is growing in good, just trying to get that root structure nice and strong and ready for cleats this spring. Tennis center improvements, we do have that contract executed. We're working on a date, hopefully at the end of this month, beginning of next month, for these stakeholder groups to be able to connect with Trickle Rollins and get that design work going. So
Good. So
Any
you
questions?
think maybe something on tennis center next month?
We are hoping to have, probably when we come back to you guys in November, we'll hopefully have that stakeholder group have
good.
connected at that point, and they'll be moving along on starting that design.
Great.
Yeah, yes, sir. Any other questions?
All right.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank y'all.
All right, agenda item 4A is the administrative services contract between the City of Kerrville, Texas and the City of Kerrville, Texas Economic Improvement Corporation. That you again, EA?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Back again. This is the annual administrative services contract. This was the item that was within your budget. It's between the City of Kerrville and the City of Kerrville EIC, and that is an amount of $100,000 per year budget. There's 4 key areas of focus that are within that contract: engineering and project management services, including construction inspection, legal services, financial services, and administrative services. Be happy to answer your questions you may have.
All right. So I'm supposing this is a one fee for everything?
Yes, sir. It's all inclusive in there. It's essentially, I did check with Ms. Yarbrough. It was changed in 2011. Previously was $750,000, and then, I mean, $75,000, and then shifted to $100,000 in that 2011 timeframe.
All right. So if we wanted to divide this, possibly have a specific amount of money in the contract for legal services and then a specific amount of money for everything else, could you guys put that together?
We could certainly look at that. You know, obviously, if you looked at it on a separate basis for each one, there's arguably years where there are a lot of projects going on, and we probably get $100,000 in project management services alone between our construction inspection and engineering services. But certainly that's something we can look at if that's the desire of this group. Well,
I think based on the most recent activities that have happened at the city, if we have to go for legal services on our own, how do we fund that if we have no line item that tells us how much we're spending? And quite frankly, I believe that there's only one of us on this board who has full exclusivity in legal services from the city, and that's very well defined in item B.
Are you referring to that part about if there's a conflict with
Sure.
the
Yeah.
city and EIC?
Yes.
So what's the resolution there? If there is a conflict? This conversation, by the way, has been had several times.
Yes, sir. Essentially the resolution there, if there's a conflict, is that the city attorney, represents the city first, and then represents EIC second. And there is the contract does have provisions for the EIC seeking separate legal counsel.
So has the council given us an allotment of funds to seek our own legal counsel?
No, sir, not currently within the existing budget.
How does that work?
We would have to talk through that.
I think we want to get that done before we execute a new contract. Whether
Yes, sir.
that's dividing up the money, whether that's for whatever that is. I mean, it says we can go get it at our own expense. We can go get our own legal counsel at our own expense of our own choice. But how does that really work?
Well, I have a question about that. If as it reads, EIC shall at all times retain the right to hire counsel of its own choice at EIC expense. So, practically speaking, if we have an item like that comes up, does that, and we agree on that amount here or that council, does that have to go to city council for approval? To approve that expense?
To approve a separate legal expense. Arguably, if it wasn't within the existing budget.
Right, which it wouldn't be, I assume, if we
That's
don't have
right.
it broken out.
That's right. I would assume that would be the case.
Are you saying that it would not be in the budget?
That's correct. There's no
Why
separate
not?
budget line item at this time within
Then
the
why
existing
not?
budget.
Why not? Because that could happen very easily. Why would that not be in the budget?
It's just not in the existing budget. I'm not saying it couldn't be in a future budget.
Can we amend our budget during the year?
Yes, sir, you have the opportunity to do that, certainly at any time throughout the year.
But
But-
it's all subject to city council's approval,
Yes, ma'am.
Not the budget, the expenditures would be.
the amendment to the
Right,
budget.
So amendment to the budget does not have to go to city council. When you actually expend the money, you would have to go to council, yes. So you can get it approved prior to.
Approved prior to spending.
Or not. That would be my guess. Now,
We
you-
know how that would go.
I mean, we were arguing over pennies, comparatively speaking, in the last budget session. And so, I'm concerned that, number one, as a board member, where's my protection with legal counsel?
Mhm.
Because there's only one member of this board who has exclusive protection.
Well, that's what the contract is for in terms of stating that you can go out and get your own legal counsel. So it becomes a question of funding, right?
Right.
So
So-
let's change that line item to at the expense of the city instead of EIC.
Well, or that your budget is automatically amended or something of that nature. So
Okay.
that you have the capacity, what we might want to think about in future budgets is set aside some level of contingency for whatever comes up that you all might need it for. But at this point, Mr. Baruti's correct in terms of the process, but council would be hard pressed not to approve it because it's in your contract that you can do it and expressly. So I'm practicing law here, Mike. Sorry.
That's
But-
okay. You're
so-
doing good.
Any thoughts on it?
Everybody else is.
Hey.
This is what happens when you've got legal counsel that's representing this board and the city council. We added this provision a few years ago with respect to if conflicts exist, what happens. I would withdraw from this board and go exclusively to council. In the 17 years I've been here, this has never come up. Does it come up in other communities? Yes. And we're not different from other communities in the sense that 4B boards such as yours, about the size and budget of yours, usually use the city attorney or the city attorney's office. Some 4B boards get to be so big in terms of revenue that they hire their own counsel. I don't anticipate this being an issue, not that we shouldn't address it and have a contingency for it, but, you know, I think, I can't imagine council would, you know, deny you all as a board the right to have legal counsel should I withdraw or something else happen.
Yeah, they could. It could, but here's the thing. I mean, I believe what you're asking is, can you get legal counsel? Well, clearly you can. Now, the other side of it is that if the issue becomes, you want to see if the city is going to pay for the legal counsel versus EIC, I think really what you're asking to do is pull legal services out of this contract, reduce the fee by whatever amount you determine legal services is, and then go out in a separate agreement to some other attorney to hire them as the attorney of record for this body. Now, to sit here and say that the city is going to just pick up the tab for legal services for this body, I'm not sure where that comes from. You know, I mean,
Well, it's the same dilemma that EIC has, not sure where it comes from. But if a conflict did arise, this says we can do it at our own expense. And I remember when we added this in here, I was on the board back then. Never did I ever think that it would come to pass, but what's been going on brings that to my mind. And Mike's even made comments in here about if you and I are going to get into a dispute, he's going with you, not me. And so I'm like, wait a minute.
okay, so
How's that gonna work?
What's the suggestion? Don't ask how it's going to work. What's your resolution?
Well, my resolution is for us to extend the contract for a short period of time that we currently have until we can get resolution on this. Because I think there's a lot more moving parts than we can discuss in here.
Can I ask, just out of curiosity, Mike, how many, this is really a hard question because every year is different, but do you have any idea in an annual basis what percentage of your time, billing hours, you know, committed to the EIC? Because I know, you know, a lot of things go back and forth between the city and the EIC. I mean, is it 20% of your time, 30, 40, or do you have any idea?
You know, it's a fair question, Mr. Naaman. It just depends. You know, kind of what pops into my head right now is, let's take, for instance, the James Avery contract. I don't think it would be incorrect to say that I probably spent 40+ hours on that contract alone. So it just depends.
What would that cost, $500 an hour if we had to hire someone?
Well, that's what I'm charging y'all.
Oh, did not know.
No, it's not $500.
Sorry.
You know, I think from time to time, we didn't do it this year, but I assume it holds water at this stage like it's done in the past. It's staff's belief that $100,000 for a year of administrative services from each of these different parts of city service is a pretty good deal.
Well, I would agree, and I think that dollar amount, if we go hire somebody, is going to way exceed whatever percentage you put on $100,000. And I see us having a problem as a board, 6 of us anyway, if we have to go hire legal services and the council decides, no, you're just going to use the city's attorney because we're not paying for it. That's the dilemma that I see could happen the way this is written.
Or even.
We've already seen that happen.
Or even if they approve to do just the, pro rata amount, that would be, if they determine X amount out of the $100,000 is for legal, which I agree with you. I think we would far exceed that number if we're having to get outside counsel. I know we would, and if we're limited to that amount, then we would likewise be limited in our representation.
Correct. Every board I serve on in this town has legal representation. That is for the board that I serve on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Well,
I
just
agree.
out of curiosity, if the staff were to do a study, for example, to try to, I don't know how, to determine in each of the main 4 areas that were brought up, you know, what they would bill the EIC, we might find out that it's $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. I mean,
Well,
No,
right
I
off
would
the bat,
agree with
what
that.
he just described to us, 40 hours
yeah,
for his salary
Yeah.
is about $3,000. So if that's what you're working with on his, if you talk about his salary, how many hours that is per, a year. So extrapolate that out how many hours you think you're getting in a year at his rate versus what's in here, and weigh it against getting somebody else.
So as a suggestion, just a path forward, we can do that analysis. In fact, I've already asked the staff to do that. It's going to be a much bigger number than the 100,000, but that's okay. Y'all need to have that number. And I think the thought is that rather than put your money into overhead, you'd rather be putting them in projects, and
Sure.
the city generally feels the same way. So we can do that analysis and bring that back to you, and perhaps, I think one of you suggested that we just do a stopgap, maybe you do a 60-day agreement or whatever, and then that goes to council for approval. In the meantime, we can craft some language to address the concern about the attorney, and in the event of y'all not having the city attorney for those services, and bring that back to you before the 60 days as an alternative.
I think the 60 days does make sense to some extent, because that's that's what council has decided to do, right, George, with regard to current city attorney and kind of a self-imposed deadline on that. And we all know that that's a key piece of this too. I think if everything had gone as, at least speaking for myself, if everything had been gone as usual at the last city council meeting with regard to continuing the contract with the current city attorney, I wouldn't personally have as much discomfort with regard to, am I going to be exposed in some way here on this board, or am I not? I think it has personally caused some discomfort for me, individually, but also collectively as a board for us. And so I think it makes sense to perhaps have the same kind of a time frame.
Excuse me, I'm curious as to, are you talking about a legal liability that we would have? Because
Yes.
it's my understanding that when I read all the documentation that was given to us in the big manual, that we are covered, that we have somewhat liability insurance, so to speak. Am I incorrect in that?
No, well,
As a board member?
you all, I'm sure, are covered by our board member policy, errors and omissions, which you're right. If that would come, then that would be submitted to the appropriate firm that handles litigation as part of that insurance policy.
So,
But I just as soon not have to face litigation because of having no one to advise me in this role to even have to get to that place, even whether it's covered or not,
let me just even if we were to approve this contract today, as is, and then something came up where we didn't have an attorney, or there was a conflict, and Mr. Hayes had to recuse himself from representing us and representing the city, we still have the ability to go out and hire an attorney at that point. Is that correct? I'm just asking.
Yes.
Okay.
If the
If we
attorney
have
will
to.
do it without compensation,
Okay.
all of it,
No,
as we
so
well
we would have to
learned-
amend our budget to
Yes,
hire an outside attorney.
and then it would have to get approved.
Okay.
That's the dilemma that I see us going, and the road us going down.
So in terms of time frame, I might even suggest that you went 90 days just because of the way that meeting dates fall, because y'all meet only once a month and council's got to approve the interim agreement and so on and so forth. It gives you a little more cushion to get something done, and with the holidays.
I have this inclination, this is just discussion here, so my initial thought was matching the 60 days and making it where it's or less, dependent upon what transpires. Because that we all know that something could transpire prior to the 60 days that was given, that council gave, because that was sort of the outer limit. And 90 days, it seems like a really long time to me.
I agree.
Okay, so just on discussion, since that's what we're doing,
Mhm.
the 60 days thing, you guys are actually talking, I believe, about two separate things. One is whether or not the city I guess what you're poking at is that if the city didn't have a city attorney, which according to this contract isn't really the issue because you'd be actually contracting them with legal services, at which point if they didn't have the city attorney that's sitting right here, they would have a different one that they're obligated to provide these services. The other part that you're talking about is the conflict, which is irrelevant of who's sitting in the chair because that's going to exist whether it's Mr. Hayes or somebody else. So that problem, if you see that as a problem, isn't solved by 60 days or 90 days. It's solved by you deciding in that time frame, regardless of the city council, that you wish to attempt to get separate counsel from whatever counsel the city is providing. But this would contractually obligate the city to provide legal services. And as far as the 60 days, there's two separate things. So if you listen close to the
I understand there's two separate things.
We anticipate conflict with the city in the future.
Okay.
So let's get that on the table. We expect that.
Okay.
And we want protection, and we want it now.
Okay. So then what you're really talking about is not getting legal services from the city. You're talking about getting outside counsel. So that's really what we would be discussing.
You got it.
Okay.
You got it.
So focus it there then. That's all I'm saying. Let's get that on the table.
All right.
I mean, I think, you know, first of all, yes, as I just stated, I already understood that there were two separate issues there. And when I make the comments that I've made, I am saying it in regard to, this is a bit repetitive, but I'm coming at it from after this last statement, that I feel comfortable. I would feel very comfortable right here, right now, approving the $100,000 contract as I've done here the last 3 years. So if things were as is. If the cities, if you're saying, well, the city would provide you an attorney, right? But see, I know who this attorney is currently. I don't know who the city might provide me and this board with as an attorney. Therefore, I'm not willing to just say, yep, I'll go with that because the city's got me covered on an attorney. So I wanted to sort of come back around and reiterate that and my understanding of the two separate issues, but my reasoning behind why I feel like we need to have a different way of approaching protection for us as a board.
If the city were to hire another attorney, we'd still be in the same position. In other words, we would have to accept another attorney or go out and hire our own.
That's correct.
That's right.
So it's, I mean, I'm not trying to disparage anybody whatsoever, but it doesn't matter really who's sitting in that chair. If the city decides that someone else is going to be sitting in that chair, I don't see any other choice. We either accept that person or we go out and hire.
Or we go
another
outside.
person,
Right.
So what I guess I'm saying is I can understand what you're saying about being comfortable with one person, but
Yeah.
I mean that could change any.
But see,
Like the city manager could change.
I hear your point, but I could see the cities, if we made a comment that said, if we made an argument, so to speak, that, well, we're not comfortable with this new attorney or a different attorney, so we want to go outside, and that it's for that reason, not that there's a conflict, and the contract currently says we can go outside. If there's a conflict, then there's a difference there. So I think there needs to be some clarification on that.
Actually, it says, notwithstanding this paragraph, the EIC shall at all times retain the right. I mean, does it have to be a conflict for us to retain
Well, I don't
an
know,
attorney?
it follows right after that conflict thing, so to me, there's a little bit of clarification needed. It's the following sentence, about right after conflict. Maybe the notwithstanding, I know I'm married to an attorney, but I don't always understand legalese, so maybe notwithstanding, covers everything else.
Yeah, despite this paragraph, EIC shall at all times retain the right to hire counsel of its own choice. The EIC.
Would you see
But
that?
I question, do we really have the right? Because if council is going to do it for free, we got all the right in the world.
Yeah.
Because there is no transaction of money, and that's the part I want to see us add in here is how that works.
And particularly if they have to approve the expense.
Yeah, that's an issue.
So I'll just make a motion that we instruct staff to revise item B in Article 1 to allow the items that we've discussed with regard to how that would work, and get that back to us within a 60-day time frame.
I'll second it.
Have a motion and a second.
Explain that again. one more
Yeah,
time.
does staff understand what's being
What do we-
directed?
Is this the breakdown of the cost of the services, or what are we asking in the motion?
Well, somehow the cost itself has the expense and the understanding of how that expense would be paid for. I mean, that's really the key here. I think notwithstanding this paragraph, it gives us the right for our own legal counsel. It costs money to do that. So that's the part I was wanting us to address with my motion.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Actually, raise your right hand. That's how we do it here. All those opposed? And that motion carries 5 to 1.
Did we say something about the extension of this or anything like that?
That's what I was going to bring up. Is
I thought it did.
Right now, we're operating without a contract because the current one expires September 30th. So I'm comfortable with doing that, but
I'm not. I think
so-
we should extend the.
okay.
I meant to include that in my motion, but didn't. So I don't know if we can amend that or do another motion.
Just do another motion, so we'll have 2 motions for this item. That's fine.
I make a motion that we extend our current contract 60 days to match.
Second it.
As a prorated amount, what are we doing with the amount?
I think it stipulates in here that you can do that.
It says you can extend.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And it does say prorated.
Article 3,
Okay,
is that right?
we do? We pay it by monthly? Okay,
Article 3.
okay. So we got a motion and a second?
Did we get a second?
Yeah, me.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. And that passes unanimously. Okay, on to, just a second. Sure.
Article 3 says by agreement of the parties here too, do we need approval of the city council to extend?
Yes.
For once.
Thank you.
You got it. All right, that gets us to item number 5, which is executive session. And I do believe we have 2 items that we want to discuss in executive session. And I'm not exactly sure which sections those are. I didn't study that. But I would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
I guess, EA, maybe you're the person to ask, are we going to be discussing 5A and 5B in executive session?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
This is what they're passing in spare.
Well, we're gonna have to have Mike in there anyway.
Okay, that's all right.
Let's do it under 551-071, 551-072, and 551-087.
We have a motion.
That's my motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. We will move into executive session. All right, we'll reconvene the meeting. It's 5:02. There was no action taken in executive session, so there's nothing to bring forward for action in this meeting at all. So
That's a good meeting.
it was a good meeting. So anyway, I guess that concludes unless someone else has something from our board. If nothing, then we are adjourned.
Hey, guys.